welcome back to Catholic Reboot. This episode is on what they call graven images. And this is a topic I wanted to talk about because you hear it so often among non-Catholics, or what I like to refer to as Bible Christians. Before getting into it, I remember when I was living at home, when I say home, my parents' house. Um, from time to time, a Seven-Day Adventist or a Jehovah Witness group would kind of come through the neighborhood, and most of the neighbors would kind of warn each other and say, "Be careful, they're going to ring your doorbell. Don't answer." Well, my dad took great delight in answering because he wanted to basically try to convert them. Um, and so they would come into the house with this great zeal, and he would just let them talk. And then when they were done, he would literally take each part of their position apart a step at a time. Now, not to be cruel, but what you have to understand is if you look at the richness of the Catholic Church and its doctors of theology and its theologians and the great antiquities over the 2,000 years, there was a significant amount of scriptural study. So the Catholic Church didn't just willy-nilly take its position on either the scripture or the actual practices within the faith. So when there is this attack on the Catholic Church as far as breaking the commandments for graven images, what you got to understand is that they typically will have it wrong, right? So what I want to do is just start by going through what it is that they're saying, right? And we'll start with a quote from Numbers 21, 8 through 9. And the Lord said to Moses, Make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and everyone who is bitten, when he sees it, shall live. So Moses made a bronze serpent. And what we understand this to be is that God surely wasn't asking the Jews to worship a serpent on a pole, right? What he was trying to do was demonstrate his power, right? So accordingly, Moses did that. And of course, everyone that looked upon that serpent on a pole was cured, and they were being bitten by snakes. And so, let's say it was the anti-venom that was given by God Himself. Now, the Seven-Day Adventist Church had written a book that's called What's Behind the New World Order. And they think they can trace it to a Ellen G. White, who is the foundress of the Seven-Day Adventist Church, right? Um, this is something that has been bounced around for quite a while, especially over the last 50 years, and that is that the church would actually change the Bible in order for it to worship graven images. So now, I used to say in previous episodes, you got to be careful with those non-Catholics because they tend to enter the story halfway, right? So they didn't start entering the picture until 1500 years after the Catholic Church was already operating, right? So they basically will try to lay waste to any of the traditions by skimming through the Bible to find something very literal, right? And this is why I've cautioned in previous episodes that Bible Christians have to be very careful because when they want the Bible to be literal, they do, and when they don't want it to be literal, they don't. For example, they don't believe that the Catholic Church is the Church of Christ. They don't believe that the popes uh, were determined by Christ. They don't believe the sacrament of confession was created by Christ. But all we have to do is go into the Bible, and we see Christ saying that very thing. And very conveniently, what they do is they just kind of jump over it, and all of a sudden, the Bible is no longer to be taken literally, right? So let's be fair. Either you're going to take it literal, and therefore there is no interpretation or theological discussion around the Bible, or there is not, right? So, according to that book, the Catholic Church is behind this New World Order. Now, it claims that the church is actually discussed in Revelation 17 as the beast of Revelation, right? So they're basically saying what? That Christ church that he created became the church of the beast. Now that just doesn't make any sense, does it? It would mean that Christ created his church, which he said would never, right, um, be destroyed. Okay, and all of a sudden, sometime during the 1500s, Christ said, "Well, I know I said that, but I'm going to step aside and we'll just kind of let the Protestants take over from here." It just doesn't line up. And that's what I mean by them starting in the middle of the story, right? So this book attempts to prove that exposing the marks of the beast um, is is what the Catholic Church has done by recreating the Bible or by mistranslating the Bible, right? And they say that the Catholic Church altered God's commandments, right? And especially the second commandment, which forbids graven images, right, and statues. So allegedly, con- the Catholic Church condones statue worship. Okay, so let's stop. Let's stop for a second and deal with that. Okay. The problem, again, I explained this in previous episodes. The problem with uh, reading the Bible is twofold. Number one, what version of the Bible are they reading? And I've always referred to the Catholic Bible, the Dewey Reams version, right? Why? Because if you look at the keepers of the Bible, the Jews were the keepers of the Bible of the Old Testament, and then the Catholic Church basically assumed the Old Testament of the Bible and then were the keepers of the New Testament or the New Covenant, right? So, by its very beginnings, the Catholic Church was responsible for the Bible and accordingly did the proper translations from Hebrew and Greek to Latin, okay? So here we are with a what I'd like to refer to a perfect Bible. Now you'd say, well, what's it matter? I mean, could the King James Bible be that different than the Dewey Reigns? Well, the construct is what the question is around because if they're going to claim that the Catholic Church intentionally altered the Bible, then we have to understand what they're saying, right? So, one version of the Ten Commandments is found in the fifth chapter of the book of Deuteronomy. It's also in Exodus 20. Now, if you're going to compare Deuteronomy 5, 6 through 21 in the Catholic Bible, uh, what would be found uh, versus what you're going to see in the Protestant Bible is that there's a slight composition problem, right? So the major differences are the way it was divided up and how the commandments were numbered, right? So unfortunately, the Bible kind of lumps the Ten Commandments altogether without the proper division or numbering, right? So um, for Bible scholars, and I'm talking about centuries after Christ in the Catholic Church, this was very important. So they didn't intentionally try to reconstruct the Bible so it fit with the Catholic Church because, quite honestly, why would they do that? I mean, there was no adverse church at that time that they needed to change the Bible for. They simply did their work and centuries, okay, of pure Bible study and due diligence by these scholars, they determined that Deuteronomy 5, 6 through 10 is the first commandment, verses 11 as the second commandment, and then the verses 12 through 15 as the third commandment, and so on, right? Now, verse 21 is split up into the ninth and 10th commandments. So this is important because it distinguished the desire or lust to commit adultery from the desire of greed to steal. Now, this division schema, so to speak, was advocated by St. Augustine in his writings on Exodus. Now, for those who don't know who St. Augustine is, he was the early theologian of the church, and he did extensive uh, study on the Bible. So, traditionally, Protestants will now consider Deuteronomy 5, 6 through 7 as the first commandment, verses 8 through 10 as the second commandment, verses 11 as the third commandment, and then so on, right? So, verse 21 is kept together as the 10th commandment. Now you're going to say, boy, this is confusing. It is, and this is why proper Bible study, Bible scholarship is very important, right? And why I cautioned in previous episodes, you just can't have people going willy-nilly into the Bible or Bible study without someone guiding them, right? Also, they have to be careful that when the schismatic faiths came around, they had the narrative to change things. Why? Because they needed the narrative to fit their heresy, right? Uh, from the Catholic Church. Catholic Church didn't need anything. It was already baked in at that time. So let's put that in the proper context. All right, now, according to the RSV Bible, which is the Revised Standard Version of the Bible that was published in 1952, and the Catholic tradition, the first commandment is number 6, I am the Lord your God. Number 7, you shall have no other gods before me. Number 8, you shall not make yourself a graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Number 9, you shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I am the Lord your God, and am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. Number 10, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. Now that is Deuteronomy 5, 6 through 10. Now, verse 7 forbids the worship of other gods, while verses 8 through 9 forbid the making of graven or carved images that would be worshiped as gods or as idols, right? Now, worshiping a statue with divine honor. Now, listen close to this because this is the part that they trip over or intentionally jump over because you'll hear it over and over again. Worshiping statues with divine honor is one way of worshiping other gods, right? And we as Catholics know what? We only worship the Trinity, right? Verse 7 is a general statement of the first commandment, while verses 8 and 9 give a specific case of the commandments. Verses 9 through 10 present the punishments and rewards that are associated with these commandments. Okay. Now, combining together Deuteronomy 5, 6 through 10 into one commandment, the Catholic Church is accused of altering commandments and covering up God's command forbidden graven images. Again, I'm going to stop. Why would they do that? Why would Christ Church? Now remember, in the early days of the church, they're basically accusing the early apostles of being part of this cover up, right? So why would they do that? If they knew that what they were doing was against the commandments, why wouldn't they just simply not do it? What was their purpose? Because the church was the seat of the devil? In the beginning, it was the seat of the devil. It just doesn't make sense, right? So they, they further move that the Catholic books only present a general form of the commandment. So in Deuteronomy 5:7, in order to expedite memorization, right? So it's much easier. But then the question is, does God forbid the making of statues, or does he condemn the worship of statues? This is another qualifying question. If God condemns the divine worship of statues, then the Catholic schema that is divided up is justified, since these images would be other gods before who? Him. Now, a separate commandment based on Deuteronomy 5:8 through 10 would then be redundant. Why would they do that? And why would God be redundant? Now, if God simply forbid the making of graven images, then there are problems all over the Bible, right? So, first, in Exodus 25:18 through 21, God commands Moses to make two statues of angels, and more specifically, the cherubim. And we know what the cherubim are. That's the second class of angels below the top class, which is the seraphim, right? Also, we know that Lucifer came from the cherubim class, but Moses commanded that two angels of the cherubim class be put on top of the Ark of the Covenant, right? Later in Numbers 21, verses 8 through 9, God commands Moses to make a bronze serpent, just as I discussed when I opened this episode up, so that the people who were bitten by snakes could look upon it and be healed. Okay. Now, is it true that centuries later, King Hezekiah destroyed the Ark of the Covenant? And it was done because why? Because it should never have been created? No. He did it because they did start to worship it as a god, right? So Kings 2:18-4. All right. Now, in the gospel, Jesus compared himself to the bronze serpent. And we read that in John 3:14. Now, what he was saying was this redemptive body coming from God the Father, right? So, continuing in the Old Testament, the inner sanctuary of the temple contained two large statues, two, of angels, according to Kings 1, verse 6, 23 through 28. Now, in the following verses, Solomon also had the walls of the temple decorated with carved images of angels, palm trees, and flowers. Where's that? Kings 1, 6, 29. During the Babylonian captivity, Ezekiel had a vision from God about the design of the new temple. According to Ezekiel 41, verse 17 through 25, this new temple contained graven images of angels and palm trees. Now, these passages in the Bible indicate that God does not forbid the making of statues. If God truly condemned the making of graven images in the second commandment, then he must have changed his mind later in the Old Testament. God doesn't do that, right? So, what is the Catholic Church's position? Well, the Council of Trent, which opened up in 1545 and lasted to 1563, this is probably one of the most comprehensive councils the Catholic Church called. And you have to think about it. Why at this time did they call this comprehensive council? Because what came before this? Martin Luther. So the Catholic Church decided, all right, we're going to clear all these issues up, and one of them is around the statement concerning images and statues. Why? Because Martin Luther was saying that the Catholic Church was doing exactly that, worshiping images. Now, shame on Martin Luther being an Augustinian and understanding that St. Augustine specifically explained this. So it has to make you wonder, what was Martin Luther really going after? Was he trying to create a narrative that all the Protestant faiths that followed after it, the 33 different sects, would pick up on what he was doing? So that's why the Council of Trent was very careful about addressing this, because what they wanted to do is they wanted to end this heresy as fast as possible, right? So they cleared it up. And if you want to read it, it was in the 25th session of the General Council. Okay? Now, the images of Christ and the Virgin Mother of God and the saints are to be had and retained, particularly in churches, and due honor and veneration are to be given to them. Not that any divinity or virtue is believed to be in them, on account of which they are to be worshipped, or that anything is to be asked of them, or that trust is to be reposed in images, as was of old by the Gentiles, who placed their hopes in idols, but because the honor which is shown them is referred to the prototypes which these images represent, so that we, through the images which we kiss or we bend the knee, adore Christ and venerate the saints whom they represent. Now, when we say saints, we're including the Blessed Mother because she's one of the greatest of the saints, right? Now, this was listed in the canons and decrees of the Council of Trent. And again, it's very important. If you want to go back, read it. Okay. Now, the church does not compel Catholics to kneel or pray before images. No one is allowed by the church to pray to images, since they have no ears to hear or power to help us, right? The church allows the veneration of the images as long as the honor is directed towards who? Christ and his saints, okay? Now, on a related issue, some Christians object to the veneration of images of the saints, since they believe that should be directed toward God's alone and not towards Mary or the saints. I'm going to stop again. I even take offense to the fact of referring to them as Christians. And I've said this before. In order to be a Christian means you have to be a follower of Christ, right? Pretty simple. In order to be a follower of Christ, you have to follow the church he created. So there's only one true Christian faith, that's the Catholic Church. You're not going to hear this out of the Novus Ordo priests. They're going to go sing Kumbaya with as many non Catholics as they can. But to be Christian, to be a follower of Christ, you must follow his church. So, in essence, we're arguing with usurpers about the the interpretation of a Bible when they really don't even have the right to request an audience. Why? Because they follow heretical faith. They should be dismissed out of hand. But out of mercy, compassion, and charity, we're going to explain. In Timothy 1 17, they discuss this whole idea of how we're venerating the actions, right, of the saints, especially Mary, and their lives. Why? Because they were the model of good Catholics, good Christians, right? The whole life was. Now, where the objection comes from is the confusion, and listen very close because this is very important. And again, Bible Christians jump right over this. There's what you call divine honor, And what divine honor is, it's an adoration or supreme honor only for God, right? And it's respectful honor that they're attacking, right? So they're attacking what is called respectful honor, which is proper for the men, the saints, right? So remember those two words, divine honor, respectful honor. If you're ever approached by a Bible Christian and they say you worship graven images, say under whose honor, right? All right. Now, according to the Bible, the people of God bowed down before King David to show him honor. This is in Samuel 2:24 through 20, right? It's also in Chronicles 1:29, 20, 21, 21, right? Now, what were they doing when they bowed down to King David? What kind of honor were they showing him? Were they showing him divine honor? In other words, supreme honor, or were they showing him respectful honor? Right? All right. Obadiah in Kings 1:18-7 fell prostrate before Elijah, showing him reverence for being a prophet of God. Divine honor or respectful honor? See, this is why you have to keep asking that question. In the Ten Commandments, we are told to honor our mother and father, which is Deuteronomy 5:16. Divine honor or respectful honor? Even Jesus defended and obeyed this commandment, as listed in Mark 7, verse 9 through 13, Luke 2:51. At least for Mary, our honor is in the imitation of Christ, her son, which is listed in Corinthians 1:11:1. So the church allows for the veneration of the saints and their images as long as it remains in the proper form of honor for men. It is good to honor the saints because of their love and trust in God. And again, this is Matthew 22, verse 31 through 32, Hebrew 11, verse 1 through 12, right? Now, the Catholic Church has not altered the Ten Commandments. Okay? The church has not dropped the second commandment, as that book had said. The Catholic numbering scheme differs from the Protestant numbering scheme. And you have to ask yourself a question. Boy, Martin Luther really messed things up. If they'd have just left things alone and stopped all these translations of a Bible that fit their narrative, probably wouldn't be getting these attacks of calumny against the church and its people. Unfortunately, the Bible wasn't clear on how to divide or number up the Ten Commandments. Now, if this difference becomes scandalous, it would be interesting to know what that author of the book thought Jesus Christ was doing when he reduced God's commandments just to two, right? What were the two commandments uh, God said were the most important? Or he actually called them the two great commandments in Matthew 22, 36, 40. Would they accuse the founder of the Catholic Church, Jesus Christ, as changing the Bible by making that statement? Now, finally, the church has strictly condemned the adoration or divine worship of saints, images, or even the divine worships of directly to the saints, since this would be idolatry and in direct violation of the first commandment. For Christians, a crucifix should not be considered merely as a statue of Jesus hanging on a cross, but as a reminder of the high cost of our salvation as well as his words to us. If any man would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Mark 8:34. All right. Now, let's wrap this up. Okay. If if the intention is to, once again, by the Bible Christians and the Protestants, to tear down the Blessed Mother, tear down the great saints of the church, what they're doing is they're taking the 2,000 years of martyrdom, great personal sacrifice, great achievements of these men and women, the saints, that added to the deposit of the faith and the antiquities of the faith of the Catholic Church. Why? Isn't this what they're trying to demonstrate, that we should demonstrate our lives according to Christ, right? Full day.